Thank you very much, Professor Rajkumar, Professor Srijit. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to thank the Jindal Global University and CUTS International for organizing this very timely conference on the economic dimensions of judicial decisions and inviting me to deliver this keynote on getting policies right for the future. Uh, we meet in rather interesting times, if I may say, apocalyptic times. The second wave of the coronavirus has completely overwhelmed us. It's not as if it wasn't expected. All historical, empirical, scientific evidence points towards the fact that the second wave of any pandemic is unfortunately more lethal than the first one. We just took our eyes off the ball. And unfortunately, a lot of helpless, innocent citizens are paying the price for that negligence. And if I may say, criminally culpable negligence. India's caseload on the 27th of April stands at 1,73 lakh cases. The good news is that the recovery has also been fairly rapid. 1,43 lakh people recovered or have recovered. Unfortunately, 1,95,000 were lost to the pandemic. But what is worrying as of today is that we are on an average, on a weekly average, adding about 3,21,000 cases daily to the viral caseload, and that unfortunately is completely overwhelming our systems. What do we have on the ground? We have a situation where only about 2.4 crore of our people out of 135 crores have been fully vaccinated. This accounts for just 1.6% of the population of this country. On the other hand, we have in the past 3 months exported 6.63 crore doses of vaccines as of today morning. These vaccines, if they would have been domestically used, would have easily fully vaccinated another 3.31 crore people. And that's a lot of people. The reason why I am flagging these numbers at this point in time, because if you were to juxtapose this against the approach adopted by the United States of America and many other European nations, they have decided to prioritize their own citizens first. In fact, the United States of America, the spokesperson for the State Department, went so far as to say that our first obligation is to vaccinate Americans first. And so therefore, this brings us to the fundamental policy question that in times like these, should India have indulged in this vaccine maitri or vaccine diplomacy or whatever else you would like to call it, or we should have prioritized our own citizens first, given that when the rollout of the vaccine started, the first signs of the second wave had already started manifesting themselves. I would like all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to seriously apply yourself to this question, because this is where the story of our misplaced priorities unfortunately starts. And this has been the endemic problem now going back over second decades. Number two, let me just step back 4 decades and take you back to 1976. Why is 1976 important? 1976 is important because that's when the reign of Mao Zedong, the great helmsman, ended in China. It had been a disastrous reign. Undoubtedly, Mao Zedong was responsible for creating the modern Chinese state in 1949. But then the various experiments that he undertook, the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, had completely and absolutely devastated China by the time Mao's life finally ebbed away in 1976. In fact, during the last years of his tenure, China was effectively ruled by the Gang of Four, which they eventually had to then face the consequences of that misdirection of Chinese policies. So, what was the situation in 1976? China's GDP in 1976 was $149.54 billion. Its per capita GDP was 156 US dollars, and its GDP growth rate was 11.33%. Now, this is a misleading figure, and I would come to it in a moment. And where was India at that point in time? India had a total GDP of 137.30 billion USD. Its per capita GDP was 206 US dollars, more than China, almost 57 US dollars more than China. And its growth of GDP in that particular year was 5.71%. Now, these GDP growth rates are misleading, and I'm sorry, these figures are 1978 and not 1976. But if you were to step back to 1976, both India and China start from a very low base. China was at minus 1.57 in terms of GDP growth, and India was only at 1.66% in terms of GDP growth. Today, 4 decades later, China's GDP is $16 trillion. And India is at $2.83 trillion. So obviously, the Chinese got something right, which we didn't. And what is it that the Chinese got right, and notwithstanding the current antagonism and the border standoff, there are certain takeaways that we as a nation need to internalize. Because in terms of size and demographics, there's nothing which really compares with China when you were to try and juxtapose certain examples or take some examples for the Indian growth story. And what China got right was that it stabilized its population. The second thing which China got right was that it was very, very cognizant and conscious of the fact that it needed 30 years of peace on its periphery in order to consolidate, in order to surmount its internal economic and human development challenges. And so therefore, if you were to look at where the population of China was at 93.7 crores in 1976. In 2021, they're at 139.77 crores. India was at 63.76 crores. And in 2021, we are almost catching up with China, and we are at 136.64 crores. Unfortunately, because of the emergency, the population debate completely went off the table. And nobody in the policy space, politicians, academicians, even scientists, were willing to touch this with a barge pole. And unfortunately, a myth was created, the myth of a demographic dividend, that this burgeoning young population is a huge demographic dividend waiting to be harvested. Now, nothing could have been a bigger lie, because what we are currently facing in terms of overwhelmed hospitals, in terms of absence of hospital beds, in terms of absence of ventilators, in terms of absence of basic physical infrastructure for a dignified living, is primarily because our numbers overwhelm our growth story completely. India occupies 2.4% of the world area, and we are a home to 133 crore people. China occupies 2.6%, or 2.5, occupies 6.3% of the world area, almost 2.5 times India's size, and they are at 136 crores, at 139 crores. So therefore, the first and the foremost thing which India needs to do is to bring the population question absolutely center stage. There, we need to shed our inhibitions, that we have to address the population issue. We need to bring our replacement rate down to negative. Otherwise, we really don't have a hope in hell. And we need to surmount this spurious debate of a demographic dividend, which has been a big cover-up for our failure to address this central question. The second thing is that India is not an emerging great power. India is still struggling in order to cope with the fundamentals of economic and human development of our people. And we need to be upfront and straight with our people about it. We need 30 years of peace on our periphery in order to be able to concentrate on our internal challenges. These myths which are propagated by retired Foreign Office types or people in the strategic establishment that India's moment in the sun has come. I'm afraid India's moment in the sun will only come when we are able to put all our children into school, when we are able to provide basic health care to our people, when we are able to ensure that the bulk of our populace is insured, when we are able to give proper health care to our people and not people dying because of lack of oxygen in our hospitals. It's time to get real. Yes, India's moment in the sun will come, but it will come maybe 3 or 4 decades down the road. If we very wisely decide not to hunker down, but to engage with the world in very exceptional terms, being absolutely clear as to what our priorities should be. With regard to India's economy, unfortunately, like China had a great helmsman, we've also had a great helmsman for the last 7 years. And there have been various experiments which have completely and absolutely gone awry. Demonetization was one of those experiments which completely devastated the informal economy of India. An ill-conceived and a hastily rolled out goods and services tax added to those woes. But most importantly, the government was not able to internalize one fundamental reality. And that one fundamental reality is that social disharmony and economic development do not go hand in hand. Money is the biggest coward, and money goes to the safest harbor. And today, because of all the discourse which has been splashed across the international press, love jihad, ghar wapsi, beti bachao, bahu le aao, and every kind of retrogressive, polarizing activity, which unfortunately has been carried out on this government's watch, has sent out a message to investors across the world that India is not a safe harbor. And this is at a point in time when countries are actually looking to diversify from the dependence which they have on China in terms of global supply chains, all leading back to the factory of the world. And the manner in which China weaponized those supply chains over the past 1 year during the pandemic has a lot of people worried. But that the investment which is going out of China is going to Taiwan, it's going to Vietnam, it's going to Bangladesh. It is not coming to India. I mean, if you look at the empirical data that from 2016 onwards, the amount of money which has left China and as to which destinations it has gone to, India has not been one of those destinations. And the reason for that is the discourse about India in the international press, in the Financial Times, in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, in the Le Monde, papers which investors globally read. The entire discourse has been completely negative because of an extremely corrosive social agenda. So therefore, if we want economic development, if we want India to grow at 8%, which is the minimum that we require in order to keep the body and soul of such a huge population together, we have to bring back social peace. And it is not something which is impossible. From 2004 to 14, following the mantra of equity with growth, the then UPA government actually lifted 271 million people, 27 crore out of poverty. Many of them who in the past 7 years have slid back into poverty. So therefore, the way forward for the Indian economy is to get the growth, equity, and social harmony balance absolutely correct, to get that equilibrium in order, and not large-scale privatization of our public assets. And nobody's arguing that they function in the most efficient manner. But that is not going to give us the 8% growth we require. We need to reignite, and we need to let loose the animal spirits of the economy and ensure that this atmosphere of coercion, intimidation, which has been created by the completely arbitrary and brazen use of the instrumentalities of the state, be it Income Tax Enforcement Directorate, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the NIA, this needs to stop, because otherwise money and people who have the ability of entrepreneurship are just going to flee this country in droves, as they have done from 2016 onwards. If I remember correctly, there was data from 2016, which I had seen some years back, that in that 1 year, 100,000 high net worth individuals from India actually became permanent residents in the UAE, most of them in Dubai. So therefore, to conclude, and I would be more than happy to take questions, that we stand on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, or in fact, not on the cusp, but maybe in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, the digital age. And we have the unique ability, given the kind of infrastructure that we have built, to harness this digital age and actually provide and actually create wealth for our people. The question is that, would we be able to catch this bus, or will we miss this bus as we missed the first, second, and the third industrial revolutions? And so therefore, what I'm suggesting is not something which is rocket science. It is not a magic bullet. It has been tried and tested in the past. We just need to go back to that fundamental template, get our growth in order, bring population back center stage, and ensure that we create conditions in our neighborhood that we are able to have 30 years, 3 decades of peace on our periphery in order to concentrate and surmount our internal challenges. Thank you very much again, Professor Rajkumar, Professor Srijit, and to the Jindal Global University, the CUTS International, for having me in your midst. Thank you very much.